Well, hey, thanks for coming in and hanging out, man.
Appreciate it.
That's awesome. No, man, I appreciate you. Glad we got connected. So giving everybody a little uh background on the connection of it. And I may butcher some of this because I'll have 11 billion messages come at different times,
Yep.
right? All over the board.
Hey,
Uh,
close to the pin. It's like horseshoes and hand grenades, as long as we get close.
Get close. That's right. That's right. So this is pretty close-ish because I know you and I had gone back and forth a little bit on DMs at one point. There was also a point where you connected with our very own Mr. Mike Trabulski,
Yep.
right? And then you had graciously sent the book that you had written that I want to talk about. I'm really excited to talk about that on here. You had graciously sent that, and there was some sort of timing where you were sending that, and I had just spoken with you, and Mike had actually was here on my farm visiting, and he's like, man, and he starts talking about you. And I'm like, I think I just got him sending the book. Like, so like the timing was something like that. And then I read your book in one sitting.
Awesome.
I just sat down and went through the entire dang thing and went, cool, man. This is one of our guys, not just because of the content, but you could just tell how it's written, your story. Just very much an Apogee guy through and through, man. So that's roughly correct, I
Yeah, I
believe.
think that's right. And I think the only other degree of connection was through my own pursuit. So I was actually on some of the original calls when the Apogee program was going nationally. And this
Oh,
was when I
wow.
had really young kids.
Yep.
I was
Yep.
thinking of
Okay.
starting one in Idaho. And then obviously Gloria had started, and now we're going to have our kids starting at the Apogee program here in Idaho. So there was that other extra layer, but otherwise you nailed it.
How cool, man. That's right. There is that layer. That's right. That's right. And you know what's really cool about that too? So again, we're just going to kind of side tangent and then we're going to dive into some other things with our folks here on the call. But um Misha Tate, I don't know if you're familiar with
Yep.
Misha, but UFC vet and just, good friend and phenomenal human. She just bought a farm right out there in that neck of the woods in Idaho too.
Oh, you'll have to connect me because I'm in the most remote town in Idaho.
Are you?
So actually, so the other funny piece is the book that you read is the
Yeah.
second book I wrote, and it's not my
Okay.
bestseller. The one that Michael had read was the one called Turning Feral, which was about my moving out
That's
to the middle of
right.
nowhere, Idaho.
Nowhere. Got it. Okay, that's right. I remember that now. Now that you're saying that, and specifically the title, very cool, man. Yeah. So Misha's going to be headed out there probably in a year or so, but she's already got the farm.
Nice.
And she and Gloria met up this last week to talk about interacting. Misha may launch a campus of her own. They may coordinate. So Idaho's it's a good spot, man. But bunch of good humans.
We're not complaining. It's
So
great out
yeah,
here.
yeah,
Anybody
not bad,
listening?
man.
Everybody on
Oh,
the
it's so
call.
cool. So part of it, man, we'll take 20 minutes or so, and we're gonna just dive into your story, dive into the book a little bit. That's really where we want to go. And then these young guys and some of our guys will jump in and just have a little conversation, before the hour is up. And then if you're good, we'll put it out as a podcast too. So
Perfect.
it'll be internal, external, and just start, telling the world about what Zach's got going down, man. So you talk about moving out into Idaho. So let's give people a little bit of that high level overview. The moving out to rural Idaho. Let's go into that a little bit first and talk about that first book. And then I've got a few questions I want to dive into based on, again, a book that I sat and read in one sitting and just went, yep, 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 yep. So let's go a little high level overview.
Perfect. Yeah. So everybody, I'm Zach. I live in the most remote town in Idaho, accessible by road. If you Google it, it's Atlanta, Idaho, like Atlanta, Georgia. Fun fact, it was named Atlanta, Idaho because in 1863, a couple of Confederate soldiers found gold there. They had heard falsely that Sherman was pushed back in Atlanta, decided to celebrate by naming the town Atlanta, only later to learn that it had been burnt to the ground by Sherman and his troops. So, fun little fact.
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, pretty cool. So 35 of us lived there year round, no grocery store, no gas station, but I ended up there by some circumstances of going through a divorce. I was a young guy, I had been married. Um, my ex-wife was an FBI special agent. I had been working in the technology space for, 10, 12 years in artificial intelligence specifically. I had followed the college or bust mentality that I think many people my age, and for those listening, hey, I'm 37 years old now. So grew up in the 90s, early 2000s. It was college or nothing. Anything outside of that, the trades was less than in the eyes of the public education that I was in. And I followed it. I went through a lot of debt, went to a lot of higher institutions, got way overeducated, and ended up bullying my way into a pretty decent job. But it was the white picket fence lifestyle that I was told I needed, and I found ourselves hollow. My ex-wife and I both did competitive jiu-jitsu. She's a black belt world champion. I was lesser than that as far as my competitive accolades, but we were finding joy or trying to and grit in everything that we could, from ultra marathons to jiu-jitsu, everything you could think of. But I was lost. And then turns out we went through a divorce, and I had just started dabbling in the hunting space, and I had the opportunity to pick up my bags and go anywhere in the world. And kind of on a whim, I chose Idaho and ended up in the most remote spot in the US.
Perfect. Well done on the overview. Thank you for that. There's a couple things even in there that I would love to I would love to unpack even before we get into some of this other stuff. You said something really interesting right there. So there's the there's the marriage piece of this young and I'd be interested in, especially with young men on the call, and again, without obviously, I'm not even going to assume any sort of good, bad, whatever. On the, we're not. I know we weren't going to bash.
I'm an open book. You ask the question, we'll get the answer.
Cool, man. No, super cool. So it'll just be more of a what did I learn from that marriage kind of situation. But even before that, you said grit. We were going after all of this grit, but we were still lost. That is interesting to me. I see this over and over and over and over, where there's the pursuit of the things that, and this ties into, I think, where we're going to go in general, but there's the pursuit of even the things that are telling us these are the directions. You got the pursuit of jiu-jitsu, the ultra marathons, the Spartan, the whatever. And again, all of those in and of themselves, great things to tackle,
Yep.
but you were still lost. What was missing? Was it because the relationship had a piece that was missing and that would have been like what was the missing thing there that says, makes you say lost?
Maturity and wisdom.
Ah, got it. Yeah.
I mean, it was,
Yep.
I had a strong opportunity to spend a lot of time overseas right out of school. So I lived in Russia, Kyrgyzstan, multilingual, got to kind of work with some anti-terrorism organizations. So I got to do some fun stuff. That's where I met my ex-wife, again, FBI special agent. So frankly, we thought we had the world by the balls. We thought
Hmm.
we had everything we wanted, but we were missing some key things in an early relationship that only came with time, which was communication with each other
Yep.
and being open about what goals that we wanted as a couple. Those
Mm,
were the two things. And we were filling those voids by external
got
things.
it.
Thankfully, we did not have the vices of alcohol, drugs,
Right.
pornography, but
Yep.
in an equally weird fashion, the jujitsu, everything else, that was just a band-aid over everything that we
Yeah.
had in our relationship that we were not addressing.
That makes a lot of sense, man. I appreciate that. And I do think this ties into, I do think there is an element that ties into, or maybe parallels where we're going to go on the education side too. But if we stick with this part just for just a second, if you had had, or no, that's more of a loaded question, what would you have needed to make that work? Not again, not framing this in a way of like, I bet you wish you could make this work. Like
Yeah.
that's not it at all. But what would it have looked like to make that work? Would there have been like on that communication piece, that wisdom that you are talking about? 100% agree. Would it have been, hey, if we had had mentors during, hey, if mom and dad had prepped here, like what would have given you those tools?
Well, it's funny. We both, my ex-wife and I, came from very loving, God-centered families.
Yeah.
We had great images of what it meant to be a strong married couple. So in reality, we had no excuse,
Yeah.
but we wouldn't have a God-centered marriage.
Got it.
Frankly, we didn't.
Yep. Yep.
We thought, and this goes back to the education piece, we
Yep.
thought we were smarter than
Yep.
everybody else.
Yep.
We saw the flaws and some of the logic that we saw that went into faith and religion because we both grew up with it. And we
Right.
both had some tainted experiences in our
Right.
use of like youth pastors, blah, blah, blah. And we just kind of pushed against that grain. And we're like, we don't need that. We're smarter than that.
Mm,
And only with the reflection of hindsight did I realize that that was the undoing
super
of the
powerful.
marriage. But honestly, if I could go back and that were injected, maybe it would have been different.
Very
But we didn't have
powerful.
that.
Yeah, very powerful. So we talk about words, words mattering, and so I like the words that you were using too. And so you said, almost overeducated,
Mhm.
and educated, schooled, however we want to put it. That is a um, it's an interesting byproduct of this society that has been told college or bust. And I don't think that's the only message that has gotten us to where we are, but we do have a population that does a lot of times feel too smart for, right? Too smart for the old ways, too smart for religion, too smart for God, too smart for you fill in the blank. And that can be a dangerous spot when we, you know, lean into our own hubris that way.
And it's ego, right?
Ego,
100%. Like there,
100% it is.
if I to follow on with that question, if I could go back and
Uh,
somehow tamp my own ego of being a young man who's well educated, try to think about family.
yeah,
Great. Now, would you ever be able to do that to a young man? Probably not.
yeah, yeah,
I would have
yeah.
resisted tooth and
That's
nail to the very
yeah,
bitter end, I'm sure.
yeah. So interesting, man. Okay. Really good. Thank you for that background and coming in. So the the book I read, The Trade Gap, and you said is not even your bestseller. So what was the first prompt? I don't know. I have not read the first book, so I don't have specifics around that, but I'd love to know what the prompt is for that and kind of the premise of all of that. Where did that come from before we even go to the trade gap?
Turning Feral, that's the name of the book. I've always been a writer.
Yeah.
One thing that helped me kind of reflect, and now I have the power to reflect on, earlier times in my life. I always journaled. I
Mm,
always wrote down my thoughts, and I go back, you read them now, and you're like, oh God,
totally.
what an immature douche. But, it's powerful
Yeah.
because I've always written. No matter
Yeah.
where I've been at in my life, I've always written. And then it turned into writing articles. And then as I was starting to get into hunting and starting to live a more self-reliant life where I didn't have to rely on everybody else to provide things for me, which was part of that catalyst post-divorce. Like, hey, how do I get by in this world? Not on my own, but like by the power of my two hands a little bit more. And turning feral was just writing my first hunting stories because I was writing. I was like, man, these experiences are powerful and I want to be able to remember them. So I'd write them down. And then I met, an Estonian, Tucker Max, the guy who wrote I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell.
Yeah. I know
Um,
Tucker's.
yeah. So, anyways, he and I kind of kicked off a little bit of a friendship. He's like, you should write a book. So that was it. So I just kind of started and kind of followed in his path to say, like, write this down, follow this methodology. I did it and, wrote a 45,000 word book in like 6 weeks and then went through the process of doing all the publishing and everything. But the book itself was just that catalytic event in my life of a divorce to saying, like, who am I now? Having
Yeah.
this ability to self-reflect on the immaturity that I carried and that I don't want to carry forward. And the hunting and trapping stories were just kind of a catalyst for that for me of re-exposing it and then just writing it to write, just to have that reflection.
How much of that book was, because he used two different words right there, but how much of that book is to reflect, and then how much of it was a process of designing the new Zach?
Almost 50-50. It was very
Yeah.
cathartic,
Yeah.
and I made sure in my writing not to, so everybody listening, my ex-wife and I went through a divorce, but she had cheated on me and it was unexpected for me. Um, Again, hindsight being what it is, reflecting
Yeah.
on our lack of communication, I understand the path towards that. I
Yeah.
didn't want to dog her in the book, but I was trying to work through a lot of emotions, like,
Totally.
the it was very cathartic. And just to give people like the TLDR on the book, it starts with me saying, like, you know what, screw everything. I want to go be a mountain man. I'm going to be Jeremiah Johnson. I'm going to live in the
Yeah.
smallest town in the US. I'm going to hunt. I'm going to trap. I'm not going to rely on anybody else. But the arc of the book is what I found out is I actually found community there. I
Mm,
found God there. And it was
mm,
all through my trying to run away and have these experiences, which were great, but took me full circle to realize that I actually really need community. I really
mhm,
need
mm.
these things, and that's what helps you grow as a human.
Yeah.
That's the arc, but it was really 50-50 to
So
answer your
good.
question.
Well, and it helps you identify what the community is that you need. We all, you can get to the point where you understand you need community, but you need the right community.
Right.
That matters. You can have all the quote unquote friends in the world. If you don't have the right ones, you don't have any,
Yep.
So that's powerful, man. And I also love the way you frame this, and I want, especially because we have young guys on here too. I want you guys to hear this, but I know dang well this is for the grown men on here too. What you talked about in terms of writing and having that be cathartic, and you actually said, I've been journaling forever, and it helps me to think. And then I started writing articles.
Mhm.
I think that is the way writing is supposed to work versus how we are, again, in education, told to work. Writing is a mechanism in schools for here's what I know based on what I just read, or here's what I right or here, let me tell you something. I'm going to put this 5 paragraph structure in, and I think we do a disservice because we actually cut the process short if we use writing just to think, to
Mhm.
see what we actually think, to get the chaos out of our brains, to put it down on paper, to now have an objective thing to look at and go, is that what I wanted to say? I don't think that's what I even think. Let me play with that a little bit, right? And you actually do that process. Then when you figure out, okay, this is actually what I think, and I actually do have something to say, then you write about it,
Yeah.
you
I
know?
think it's a
Yeah.
powerful process
Yeah.
that is underutilized, I think,
Yes,
in
sir.
today's
Agreed.
day.
Yes, sir. Could not agree more. Could not agree more. Really good, man. Okay, so then the trade gap. Break break the rules, learn a skill, own the future, own
Yep.
your future, right?
Yep.
Unpack the subtitle for me a little bit if you don't like. What rules are we breaking? What rules are we breaking? Why are we breaking them?
Well, I think this will be part and parcel to the group listening
Yes,
here. But well, everybody here has been alive in the last 30 years,
yes, sir.
clearly,
True story.
at some
True
point.
story. Fact.
So let's start with there. Let's start on a factual basis. With that, you have probably been exposed to what we kind of already alluded to, this college or bust mentality, like that higher education is the key to unlocking
Mm,
exponential growth and wealth and everything else you want in the world. Um, my own personal experience has been that yes, it can be very helpful. And I want to be explicit here. Like I did go down the educational path. I have a master's degree in statistics from Johns Hopkins University, and that has helped open doors for me to a career that
yep,
has been very profitable for me.
yep.
However, the other side of that, in a lot of instances, has been hollow and has eroded other parts of my life,
Mm,
unbeknownst to me. And in my push and turning feral, I kept my traditional 9 to 5 job throughout that whole experience. But I was learning other skills. I was learning to weld because I'd have trailers break down. I was
mm,
learning basic electrical skills because I was relatively off grid and had to do solar. I was learning to trap and I was learning how to do like basic taxidermy because I frankly couldn't afford to do any of that or send any critters that I got off for taxidermy. So a
mm,
lot of the lifestyle that I lived was a forcing function to learn skills. And I had never been much of a hands-on guy. I grew up very urban. My family didn't hunt. I never really had to change my own oil in my car until I got
mm,
to that point, which is embarrassing to say in a lot of instances, but it's the truth. Everything was provided for me in the world that I grew up with. So when I cut and run, I was forced to learn some skills along the side. Um, and the crescendo happened is at some point, I ended up losing my cushy 9 to 5 job. And at that point in my life, even though we were living off grid, I now have 3 kids. I have a beautiful wife. We have a wonderful God-centered marriage. And all of a sudden, I was looking around and I had no income. I had 2 mortgages, car payments, the whole lot. And the only thing that I could rely on to help provide for my family in that instance, and mind you, it took me 11 months to find a new role,
mm,
were the skills that I ended up acquiring. So I
mm,
ended up trapping professionally. I was trapping wolves for the state of Idaho. I was trapping marten live for the state of Idaho. Well, actually, it was for the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, so nationally, and doing like regular beaver fur trapping and everything else. And that's what sustained my family. And that's what was kind of the inkling for the idea of the trade gap. It gave me that time to think and say, hey, this whole path I've been on, is it the right path? These are the things that are bringing me joy and helping me provide for my family, these trades or skills, however you want to, classify them. And it got me thinking. And the only other little point that I want to add on there, and this is for all the men on here specifically, during that time of unemployment, it was a big drawdown in the tech world. You saw
Mm,
layoffs from big companies like Facebook, Meta, Google.
hmm
I had two acquaintances, guys a little older than me, but all had families. Two guys that I had actually had personal interactions with in some capacity throughout my career. They too had both lost jobs either the year prior or that year, and both put a gun in their mouth and killed themselves
Man.
because
Yep.
they felt they couldn't find another job. They went the same route I did, 11, 12 months, but they had nothing else to fall back on. And for whatever reason, they felt that they couldn't learn anything else. And those two things combined were what made me go down the path of thinking
Man.
about the trade gap and what it really means for men in America.
Um, I'm so sorry to hear about that. Um, again, I love the words you're using too and how this is framed. So we say this all the time because people will hear us say, look, college isn't the end all be all. And they're like, oh, you hate college. And it's like, nope, that's not what we said. That's a logical fallacy in and of itself. It's not what we said. There are skills that can be acquired even in that traditional realm of academia. Knowledge acquisition itself, wrestling with text, learning to write, creating a network that comes out of your college. All those things are skills.
Hmm.
Those are skills. You are acquiring a certain set of skills. We talk about a degree culturally, the we talk about a degree as something to fall back on, as if it is a catch all, end all, be all scenario.
Yep.
What you're saying when you say that is I'm falling back on this very narrow definition of what skills I have acquired. The skills I've acquired are I know how to play school and anything that is just tangential to that.
Yep.
So what you're talking about is simply more skills in the tool, right? I grew up in this, you were educated, but then you came over and you're like, but I've never even changed my own. Oh, I'm overeducated, I'm underskilled,
Yep.
right? And so, um, when somebody hears skill today, I think people instantly think vocational blue collar, right? But it's more of a mindset. It's a full tool belt. It's this self-reliance, resilience, practicality spectrum of things, right? And
And
so
I think I would include writing in that.
100% would too. Yep, I would too. You're exactly right. So how how do we, and this is not rhetorical, I don't have an answer for this. This is more just coming out of my head. It's like, how the heck do we get somebody, young, old, whoever, to adopt the mindset of, look, it is self-reliance, it is the resilience, it is the practicality, it is just more tools in the tool belt. How do we get them to adopt that to say, look, the more skills I have, then I
Mhm.
actually have something to fall back on. Like, how do we make that cultural shift?
That is, that's kind of the crescendo of the book of like, how do
Yeah,
we do that? And I don't
yeah,
have a good answer.
yeah,
You're not going to read the book and come walking away like, yep, we've got a blueprint now.
yeah, yeah,
But it is, in my mind, the terminology when you go to a university in the United States right now, it is called a general education.
right.
Most colleges are 4-year institutions where you do 2 years of what they call gen ed,
Yep,
general education. That could be a little bit of languages, some basic math, classics, whatever. It's very
yep.
broad, and students self-select into that. What I kind of pull together at the end of the book is that is not a general education. It's not.
Mm, mm,
A general education would be what you're talking about, which is that component. We should
mhm,
study those things. We should be as broad as we can, and there's value in that. But what has been left off are the other things you talked about, like
mm.
strike an arc and learn to, have a
Yeah,
like lay a bead of on two pieces of metal and put it
yep,
together. Learning to change the oil in your car, basic plumbing, or knitting. Like there is such a broad thing of stuff you could do, trapping, tanning, whatever. But our definition of general education needs to be really broadened to say we need to expose people to the most amount of things.
yeah,
Of course, like I think of it as a Venn diagram, so like two concentric circles. You have people who were born to swing a hammer and will never step foot into an institution, and that's okay. You have people on the other end who were born and just have a knack for like explaining algorithms in some white paper that
Yeah.
they're never going to pick up a hammer.
Yep.
But the overlap of people who can do both is the majority of our society, but we've still got them split into two different areas instead of letting them.
That is such a well put, and that gives such a good visual because as I'm sitting here listening to this, it's like there's this tension in our culture between get a college degree, get a safe desk job versus learn a skill, build the real world resilience. But that's it really is being painted. It's like a false dichotomy.
Mhm.
Like, it really is. Like it doesn't have to be a one or the other sort of thing. And it's a reconciliation or an integration of those two worlds. It's really good. And you've got into like you got the background in AI and kind of like the machine learning, right? And Fortune 500 tech. I mean, you have that background, but then you've got the experience with the hunting and the trapping and the, rural, remote, living off grid. How do you see yourself as more one or the other? Do you find yourself feeling like you oscillate back and forth, or do you really just look at yourself in this almost, I hate the word that gets because it gets bastardized so much, but this holistic, point of view of like I've got kind of all the above.
In the book, there's one point that I do write out that, I used to go to all these FBI dinner parties because my
Yeah,
ex-wife.
yeah, yeah,
And, people would ask, like, what do you do? And I always worked in artificial intelligence, building models. Like, so I was part of the pre-team for like Amazon Alexa and building
yeah,
like really complex things. But I was just writing or doing PowerPoints. That was my job. It still is to this day, to be frank. And I call it digital dust because you can't hold it in your hand.
yeah,
But I can never felt comfortable saying what I did. They'd be like, what do you do? I'm like, I don't really know what I do. I
yeah,
kind of like pass the buck off. Because I didn't have confidence in it. But now that I've kind of broadened myself, people ask, I'm like, yep, I'm a writer, I'm a welder. You know, that does not define where the majority of my income comes from. Because that's
yeah,
still, I work for a Series D startup right now, building algorithms still to this day.
yeah, yeah.
But when people ask, that's what that's my identity now. It's not I'm some fancy worker or whatever. Like I'm talking about the things that bring me joy as an
Like,
individual, and
yeah.
those things do.
I like that. It's such a simple, which is again usually the mark of a more genius approach. It is a simple way to look at that, and it's a more honest way that I think everybody could look at things. I really like that. Um, so you're in, guys. I have a few questions that I kind of want to still explore, but as you guys start hearing things too, men, young men, you guys can start putting your hands up at any time, and I'll work you guys in. So if you guys have some things that come out, please put those hands up. So what is a with all of that right now, what does kind of a daily rhythm look like for you? Like how much of everything is shaped by or like physical trade skills, versus the tech and the mental work? Like what does that look like for you in practicality?
It's a difficult balance.
Yeah.
So the early days of my young adult life,
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate in that I found sports. I was a
Mm,
wrestler, wrestled in
mm,
college. I still do jujitsu to this day, as much as I can when we're in town.
mm.
And I've always had a very disciplined mindset. And when I talk about people learning trades, the number one question that I get is like, I don't have the time, especially when I'm talking to other, what I'll call knowledge workers, people who are kind of in a white collar thing. And they're like, well, how do you find the time? I'm like, well, you make the time.
That's right.
Like I went to our local community college to learn, like do welding school at night. I'm currently getting my electrical journeyman's license over an 8-year period. So I'm
Whoa.
still doing school at night. Now,
Yep.
this is on top of being my number one job, which is being the best freaking father that I can be,
Yep.
being a good husband, having a God-centered marriage now, which is a lot of freaking work, by the
Yeah.
way.
Yep.
It's way easier to not have that.
Yeah.
It has a lot more consequences, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's built around this life of discipline. So balancing it is nothing short of discipline.
Yeah.
The best way that I had it put to me recently, so for those who are interested, I have a podcast all on trapping. It's called The Okayest Trapper. One of the most famous hunters in the world, Jim Shockey, was on recently, and he's a New York Times best-selling author. Um, and I was talking to him, and he's like, I was like, what is it that gets somebody from point A to point B, like in writing a book? I have always thought it was grit. Like if you want to do something, you get up, you wake up at 4 in the morning, you write your stuff
Yeah.
before you do your day job, your family job, everything else. That was my approach. His was different, and I have now found myself aligning to it. And it's all desire. He said,
Mm,
if you have the desire, you will find a way. Now, there
mm,
is a component of grit to that, but it
mm,
is desire, full
mm,
stop. And that
mm.
has kind of changed my mindset very recently because prior to, I would have said it's just grit, discipline,
Yeah.
but I did have the desire.
Yeah. That's really good, man. And so I was talking to, it's funny how this all comes full circle too, and this is probably too much information, but this is just helping me get it out of my brain and mouth. So we had a young man named Maxim Smith, 20 years old, joined us a couple weeks ago talking about what he and his father had put together as really a post high school educational experience. Um, and called the preparation, and really, really solid. So we had him come in, and then I get a text message from a friend of mine named Craig Ballantyne. Craig's an author, and he's introducing me to Matt Smith, who is Maxim's dad. And he's like, "Oh my God, this you'll love the preparation. You got to meet this guy." And I'm like, "All right, cool." So Matt's actually coming in with our men, I think next week. So all this goes, and so I told Craig, I'm like, hey man, by the way, you'd like this book too. So I just recommended your book to him. I'm like, this is another guy that's like us in the same vein. And so you're talking about this desire, if you have the desire, you'll find a way, and that being the thing. Craig's take on all of it, which I have found myself aligning to, is well, what is the identity that you have actually had, that you've actually accepted? Because if you have that identity inherently has the desire to do what needs to be done to get what you want. So a lot of people smarter than I saying very similar
And
things.
I think it's my wife and I were literally talking about this morning about the power of words,
Yeah,
a little bit of like this manifestation. But when I first wrote Turning Feral, the
yeah.
first book, I was talking to Tucker Max. He's like, "Hey, are you an author?" And I was like, "No." He's like, "Have you written a paragraph?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "You're an author."
And you are own it. Yeah,
And that ownership of like,
right.
I am an author.
That's
Okay,
right.
I'm a writer or I'm a
That's
whatever. And it goes to
right.
what Craig was saying. It's like that can
Yes,
feed into desire, but you have to own
you have to
what
own
you
that.
want.
And the example that he uses is so simple, but it's so. He's like, look, if somebody is a vegan and they identify as a vegan, it's so much more powerful than just saying, "Hey, I'm not somebody that eats meat. I don't eat meat. I don't eat meat. I don't eat meat." Well, sometimes I will. Sometimes he goes, he's like, "I'm not a vegan and neither am I," but he's like, but somebody who identifies that, whether you think veganism is right or not, if they identify as that, they draw that pretty freaking clear distinction,
Yep.
right? Like, cool. But man, shouldn't we do that too with our words? Shouldn't that mean something and have very clear left and right boundaries that gives us that identity that we then lean into? And that's the desire is inherently there because it's within those boundaries.
And the counter is there too. And one thing that I'm still
Right.
struggling with to this day is negative self-talk.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
working out, like I'm like, oh, I'm silly, but I'll be like, if I'm off my workout track, I'm like, I'm a fatty or I'm this. And this is what prompted the top conversation with my wife
Yeah.
and I. It goes back to
Yeah.
communication. I sat her down this morning and I said, can we talk about something that bothered me? Because yesterday we have 3 young kids, all
Yep.
under 4 years old.
Yep.
And yesterday she said out loud, she's like, I'm not cut out to be a mom. And now
Mm.
she's the best mom ever. But she was in
Mhm.
a moment of frustration, said those words out loud. We didn't
Right.
cover it then, but
Yeah.
afterwards we talked about that power of
Yeah.
words and
Yeah.
manifesting. So it goes both
Yeah.
ways.
Yes, sir. 100% it does. Really good. All right, let's get a couple of these handsome gents in here. Mr. Charlie Warner.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hanson, for coming on the call today. I appreciate your time.
Appreciate you, Charlie. I love the hat too. I used to live in Texas.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I'm in Texas right now, so I love it. But my question for you is, you talked about how you've always had discipline and stuff like that in your life, and I'm just wondering, so with you, you're learning all these trades, and you seems like you're very knowledgeable in kind of hunting, trapping, stuff like that. When you were younger, I'm wondering if you ever had any interest in that, or if ever, like, at all, or even as when you got a little bit older, or did you just when you started that, did you just like, "I just wanna try this?" Like, I'm wondering if you even knew about that when you were younger.
I've got a story for you. Um, I was a very scared child. I was afraid to try anything. If my dad asked me to do like baseball, but I don't know. I was nervous to try anything new. And up until I was like 12 or 13, that was my MO. I just didn't want to try anything. I'm sure my parents had been rolling their eyes like, what are we going to do to get this kid out of his shell? But I eventually just got tired of that on my own. And, funny story, I decided to join wrestling fully on a whim my freshman year of high school. And I went out to our first practice, kind of forced myself through that to kind of learn that little bit of discipline. And the funniest thing is that my very first wrestling match, I was on the JV team. I wasn't supposed to be on varsity, 135 pounds. The very first night, my mom, my dad, and my sister were there to watch me. And the varsity wrestler got sick or hurt. I don't remember the case. And all of a sudden, I had to bump up to varsity on my very first time ever wrestling in front of anybody. And I was in a singlet in a cold gym with really stupid looking headgear. And I was about to go against a state, not a state champ, but he was like top five in the state. I go to sign in at the little table. I turn to look at the mat and walk on, and the lip of the mat was curled up. So as I go to the center of the mat, I trip, I face plant, break my nose before
Mm,
getting on the mat,
mm.
blood streaming down, call blood time before the match starts, stick tampons up my nose, eventually have to go back out there, and I get pinned in like 10 seconds, all with my family going there. And that was what I say is my real true first taste of humble pie. And what realized though is when it was done, no one cared. My family still loved me. My sister made fun of me, but it was it.
Yep.
And then when I got back in the wrestling room the next day, everybody gave their little chuckles and like, let's get better. And that was the point that I needed as a young man to say, like, oh, it's okay to try. It's okay to fail. You just got
Mm,
to get through that fear of starting. And that was
mm.
my experience. So hopefully that answers your question. But
That's really good.
that was that was it. So just you can't be afraid to try and fail. And everything's going to be okay on the other side of that.
Okay, that makes sense. Yes, sir. I appreciate that answer. That's a great story.
Awesome.
Yes, that's good stuff. Good question, Charlie. Yeah, that's really good. I'm going to throw this out there. There is no wrong answer. It's okay, Zach, if you don't get this right, but you please get this right. What is the greatest wrestling related movie of all time do you
Vision
have?
Quest.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. God bless America. I knew we were good friends. I knew it. Thank you so much. So
There's
it's
only two answers to movie questions. It's either Vision Quest or Jeremiah Johnson. There's no
God
in
bless
between.
you.
So you have a 50-50 shot.
You got a 50-50 shot no matter what. That is so, I love it, man. So Frank Jasper, who plays Shoot, has come in with our young man and
Oh, awesome.
he's been a
Yeah.
part of this. Really cool. My son is named Loudon,
Oh,
if that gives you any sense of where we are on this. So right
yep.
on, brother. Yeah, I love it, man. All right, Ellis.
How's it going, Mr. Hanson?
And freaking tastic.
Good to hear. I appreciate you coming on and taking some time out of your day to share your story with us a little bit. Um, well, by the way, first off, I did jujitsu for 4 years, so we got something similar there.
Sure.
Awesome.
Um, and I loved it too. It was awesome. But question for you. It sounds like you kind of went through some struggles in your marriage and stuff, and it sounds like you and your wife got divorced and whatnot. I'm curious, what did you, after the divorce and stuff, what did you integrate into your life to push you and your wife to have a successful marriage and to really work at that? I'm sure there were tons of different things y'all had to change and do, but like if you could give like three pieces of advice to us young dudes that aren't married yet, like
Yep.
what would that be?
So I'll be clear. So I divorced from my ex-wife and moved out here, and we did not reconcile. We did not go down that path. And I ended up remarrying. So what I can do is give you like three pieces of advice from two different angles. One of someone who had what looked like a happy marriage but wasn't, and then what is now a God-centered. So one, put God first. That would be my number one advice, as a couple. Talk about it. One of the biggest things that my wife now and I do regularly are daily devotionals. as time allows it, we sit down and we'll do a devotional, and these devotionals usually prompt us to actually ask tough questions to each other. It's like, what is bothering you right now? Or, what can I do to be a better husband? Things like that in a God-centered approach. That's number one. The second, which is kind of in line, is communication. Like whether you're dating or whether you're, married to somebody, it is about open communication. The example I gave about yesterday with the one thing my wife said that kind of sat wrong with me. Like I could have just left that be, and that might have stewed. It might not have, but it's rather to get it open, which leads to the third point, which would be honesty. You know, in my first marriage, you know, when I reflect on it, there were things that I just kept to myself that ended up eating away and eroding at my soul and eroding at our marriage. It could have been my thoughts of, lack of intimacy. It could have been insert anything. If you can have and start a relationship based on honesty, that's it. Like any little lie, white lie, whatever you do to try to get in the door when you're dating someone, because we as men, we all do it. We all kind of introduce these little things to make ourselves seem bigger than we are, or, whatever the case may be. But if you don't address those early, you'll be surprised at where they catch up to you 5, 6, 10 years down the road. So those would be the three things that I would suggest. Again, don't take me as a person who's done it great. I'm on my second marriage. So, but this one's much better. And again, God-centered, talk to each other, honesty.
For sure. Thank you, man. I appreciate
But
it. It's
by the
awesome.
way, my daughter's name is Ellis. So, I know
Are
it's a
you
good,
serious?
yep. So
How? No way.
it's a
That's
great
awesome.
name.
It is a great
Yeah,
name.
it is. It is.
It's one of those names too that's very, I think, very powerful both ways too. There's some that it's like, okay, I see those being used both ways, but
Yep.
to me it feels a little more like a, whatever. But that I can see it being, it's very powerful both ways. I
And
love
there's
it.
an Ellis, Idaho, and a very beautiful place in the Passamaquoddy Valley. So if you
Is
want an
there?
excuse to go to Idaho, go visit Ellis, Idaho. There's nothing
I,
there except pretty land, but
yeah,
worth
You know what's
it's like Atlanta, Idaho. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
you know what's funny is I've only met two other people named Ellis, and they've both been girls, so I'm kind of just discouraged at this point.
Well, I'll tell you what, you've done the name well, sir.
Yep.
You do the name proud for men. I'll tell you that.
Thank you. I
Yes, sir.
appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Man, that's funny.
Well, the funny thing, last point on that,
Yeah, you
we
good.
didn't find out the gender of our child until she was born, and we had Ellis, and we were going to stick with that whether it was a boy or a girl. So,
There you go. Yeah, there you go. That's so funny. So you've got talking about trade, yeah, looking at like 10, 20 years out. I know like this is always one of the interesting conversations. So this is selfish on my side, and again, I don't have an answer to what I even think I'm about to ask. So I talk to parents uh, day in and day out. Many times we're talking about it from a look, I want all options to be open for my child, which is I love that concept, and I like to test and see if they mean all options or if they mean all options as long as the option is college, right? I always like to have that conversation and go, do you mean all options like every college or do you mean all options? Um, but then I have to usually walk them through they're like, oh no, okay, well, even if it's just say even if it's college, he's 5 now. What does he need to do to get ready? And I always try to draw them into understanding, like, look, you're talking 13 years out, maybe. We have no idea what the landscape looks like. We don't know. We don't know what the world, not just the landscape of college itself, but what does the rest of the world have going on? How easy is the access of knowledge? What is the degree worth versus what it's worth? Like, there's so many questions there. If we're taking that same line of reasoning over to, what we're calling trades, but again, simply skill acquisition in a different manner here, what does that look like in your best guess 10 years from now, 20 years from now? Like, what does the opportunity look like there? And if this gap continues to be there, then, and we don't fix that, what happens? That,
the my glass half empty view would be that if this is not addressed,
mhm.
it's what you saw, and I talk about in the book on the historical background.
Yep.
At the end of the Roman Empire, Their aqueducts started to fail. Their road systems were failing. They had no more warriors because they were training people only to study philosophy, and they didn't have anybody to defend their different areas of the Roman Empire, which led to conquer and ultimate disbanding of the Roman Empire.
Yep.
That's my glass half empty look,
Yep.
which means we have to address this. We have to build workers in this country who are willing to swing the hammer, to learn how to weld, to plumb, to do all these different things. And the trajectory is showing that we're on the path towards the fall of the Roman Empire. So we have to fix that. What that means for young men now, and women or anybody really, is there's opportunity.
Mhm.
Now, overcoming that cognitive dissonance that we have around college or bust, it is counterculture ultimately to say, I don't want to go to college. I want to go pursue a trade. Um, and I want to be clear that I'm not saying that there's not value in college. But in some of the people that I interviewed for the book, the people who were all doing very well, that went into the trades out of school, some of them went on to get a college education afterwards. They did it for the credentialing for whatever reason that they needed to. So I start to look at college as a credentialing tool. You may or you may not need that credential. However, the opportunity is very ripe for very smart, enterprising people to get into trades, learn them, and maybe build a business,
Yeah.
not just be a worker. And this
Right.
all kind of comes full circle back to that idea of desire. I think there is an approach that if you have desire and you have the ability to see where opportunity lies, and it might lie outside of the college world, if you have the desire, you will figure out how to make it work. If you want to go to college and you have the desire, like I did, you will make it work. It might be more painful, but you can make it work. So if you have the desire, I just think we have to open people's aperture that there are more opportunities out there. And then specifically to the trades, like we are losing tradesmen who are retiring. We're not filling their shoes,
Right.
and there's just opportunity there. That's
That,
that's the
that is the word. That is the word that I wish more people would lean into, because the cultural trajectory has been, well, do what everybody says they have to do. And by the way, everybody's doing it. And so that's inherently driving down the value of what is being acquired or what theoretical skills are being acquired, because you've got everybody with these skills. And then you're coming out and they're finding out that there's no opportunity with those skills. What if, crazy idea, you take a look at where the opportunity is, and instead of playing a game of hope, you go, well, here are the opportunities, and I'm just going to go ahead and work towards those opportunities. It just seems to make a whole lot more sense, man.
and it's not they're not mutually exclusive. You know,
That's
I
right.
I I, I,
That's right.
ref, I reflect back
I
on
agree.
my college experience where
Yep.
I did work multiple jobs to go through college,
Yep.
but none of them
Yeah.
related to trades. Like you could go and you could get a general public education, but maybe
Hmm.
you weld on the side, or
Yeah.
maybe you become
That's right.
like an apprentice or an electrician,
That's right.
and then you have options. That opens
Right.
up your options and
That's
your
right. That's right.
but
And
it's
that
one or
is
the other in our nation right now. It's just you
God, and
can't
that
have
is
both.
it's that is one of the biggest takeaways here, just for me in general, is the realization or the reminder that that is a false dichotomy that is being presented.
Yep.
It really is. So if somebody is listening then and goes, okay, I want, I want more. Maybe it's a young man, maybe it is a young lady, maybe it's a parent of a young man or a young lady. We had a lot of parents that listen. And like, yeah, I want more of this trade gap balance in my life.
Yep.
Or I want more trade gap balance for my young person, but I don't know exactly where to begin. How would you look at integrating both of those, maybe as a teen or a young 20s, or like what that integration strategy look like for you?
Relentless curiosity. You
Yeah.
know, I got my first car when I was 16 and I wasn't curious. I wasn't curious about how it worked.
Yep.
I put gas in the thing and I got from A to B.
Yep.
But this relentless curiosity around the world, like we've just become so soft to everything just working. Your car
Yeah.
breaks, you take it to a mechanic. You come back and you pick it up and you keep driving it. You know,
Hmm.
you got to go eat. So you go to a grocery store, everything's there. But you
Hmm.
need to be curious about where all this is coming from. Like, how
Hmm.
did this meat get processed into a, you know, tri-tip? I mean, let's take that example. Like, where does that come from on a cow? Like, I had none of that curiosity, none of it. And it wasn't until I kind of started enforcing my own principles of grit in my own life. Like, frankly, the reason I got into hunting is because after wrestling jujitsu, my ex-wife and I, we were trying to figure out how to eat better to have better performance. And that
Yeah.
led us down the path to wild game. And then I was like, oh, what about this? And it started sparking this curiosity. So I think I would say it starts with parents first and foremost for them showing that curiosity and doing it themselves for their kids. But if you're already in your teens and whatever situation you come from, be curious.
Yeah,
Just ask
man.
the question, or at least watch a YouTube video on how to change your own oil. Like it doesn't have to go as far as becoming an expert, but just at least a nibble on these things we interact with every day about how they work will take you a long way.
Dude, it's a superpower. That curiosity is a superpower. And by the way, there's a byproduct of falling back in love with life in general too that comes out of that
Yep.
because you realize how much vastness is out there and that doesn't turn into some soul-crushing thing where you're like, "Oh my God, I'll never know everything." It turns into this like, "Holy cow, I'll never know everything." And that's cool. Like I'll just like let's just go see what I can learn, right? It brings you back to that childlike wonder because you're curious again. And
And
I
I think a lot of things that stop people is the fear of failure. And it
agreed.
goes back to that little wrestling story I
Yep,
had when
that's right,
Charlie
man.
popped up. It's
Yep,
like
yep,
you're probably going to mess
yep,
it up,
yep. You're good. Absolutely,
but
you're gonna
who
mess it up.
cares?
You're
You
gonna
know,
mess it up.
there's always gatekeepers and there's always people who are really deep into whatever you're looking to get into, whether that's jujitsu, whether that's,
Yeah,
insert whatever cool thing you want to do, paintball, I don't care. You're going to
yep,
have people who are like, you can't do that. You won't want to do that or make fun of you for failing, but screw them. You know,
yeah.
that's
They
all that
don't.
it comes down to. Like,
A
learn on your
hundred
own.
percent, 100%, man. We moved out to this farm a few years ago. It's funny. I got one of my Apogee brothers who's over here in here right now, and some of you guys know him. I'll bring him in here in just a second. But um, and he's like, we were looking out on the farm that we're out. We've been out here on the farm for 3.5 years, and he's like, dude, I was showing him all the stuff, and he's like, like, what was it like when you first moved out here? Because we moved out there from California, and I'm like, completely overwhelming, dude, completely. And we still mess things up to this day. And you figure it out and you fix it and you move forward, and now you got a little extra piece of wisdom, right? It just is what it is. And the old farmer that actually sold us this place was just here last week. And he came back out to visit some people, and we had him staying next door. And he came in and almost like this backhanded compliment, basically like, I didn't think you guys would still be able to do this a few years from now. Like, I just thought you guys would come out from California and mess it all up and leave. Like,
Yep.
and it was like, no, man, like push, it's okay. Don't get over that fear of failure. And I think there is something to be said, especially for young men too, to know. Um, One of the other things that can suck your curiosity out is when you get distracted by things that don't matter. I think that's one of the big killers too. There's the fear that, we're talking about, and then there's the, okay, well, I don't need to be curious about this because I've got all of this convenience and I'm going to lean into the distractions, whether it's doom scrolling, cell phone and Instagram and TikTok and video games and whatever. Like, cool, man, that's fine. There's a place for it, but it can kill your curiosity for the real world too.
That is true. And even as a 37-year-old
Yes,
man
sir.
who didn't grow up in social media, like, I didn't even have an iPhone
Sure.
through undergraduate college or anything like that.
Yep.
Like, I just recently had to install a ClearSpace app on my phone because I found myself doom scrolling on the toilet or doing something that was
Right.
eating into my ability and my desire for other things.
That's right.
So
It's
it
not
can get
just
anybody.
It's not 100. Well, just it's not something's wrong with our youth. No, it's just this is how people are designed, and those things are designed. So again, there's the time piece that we got to control because it takes the time away. But it's that other. It takes curiosity. It takes drive. It's actually a physiological response.
Yeah.
So that's something that we're all battling against, man.
And Matt, I do want to be super respectful of your time too. I only have 5 minutes left because I do have to hop
I
to one.
was
So I want to make sure that we
And I
cover
was gonna say
on.
the exact same thing, man. So we will definitely. I was just gonna the final thing on our side is, you're talking about getting this journeyman license over the next 8 years and this long tail game. And so that's the final question on our side is, so what do the next few years look like if Zach has his way of what the next few years looks like for you and your family? What does that look like? Where do people find the book? How do we support best?
Yeah, what does success look like? That is a constant question, and I have absolutely zero good answer. But
Yeah,
what I have is success to me is that relentless curiosity. My Instagram handle is at let me die learning, and I mean that. Like, I might not finish that journeyman electrical license. I might buy an electrical company, but I don't know. But I
Yeah.
know that I want to learn these things because there's opportunity there, even on the side, whether that's a hedge against potentially losing my job again. Yeah, that might look like success.
Mhm.
Would my books becoming New York Times best-selling books? Yes. And me becoming a full-time writer, would that be success? Yes. Would anything else be
Yeah.
success? Yes. But my definition of success for me in the next 5 years is being the best dad, the best husband that I can be and raise the next great kids. That's what matters most to me. Everything else is tangential, um,
Bingo.
and a nice to have, to be truly
And you
honest.
know what's cool is you get to fully control that.
Yep.
Man, if more men would just figure that part out, like that's the part you get to control, and all these other things, cool. We'll see what happens with them. Maybe it looks like this, maybe it looks like this, maybe it opens up this door, maybe it closes this door. That's fine. We'll see. We'll figure it out. I'm gonna focus there. We'll do all this other stuff and we'll see what happens.
That did say one thing that I do want to put out here that my wife gave me as advice that was fantastic and has changed my mental game. You talked about like all these little things. That doesn't mean that you don't pursue those things and just
That's
see what
right.
happens. You have to
That's
get
right.
effort into that. If you have an idea, my wife told me that that's God telling you that you have it's an opportunity. You might
Mhm.
be praying for opportunities and you might have an idea for a book.
Mhm.
You owe it to yourself and that gift from God to poke at it.
That's right.
You might poke at it a little while and be like, "Oh, that was actually a pretty dumb idea. Let me put that away."
Yep.
But if you keep having those thoughts of something you want to do,
That's right.
you keep poking, you keep prying, and it doesn't go away. That's a gift from God, and you should pursue that. And that's been my mental shift too. That's how the trade gap got out the door. It wouldn't leave me, so then I eventually focused on it, got it out the door. I think that's great advice for anybody.
Could not agree more. Could not agree more. Brother, so appreciative of you, man. The trade gap. Um, give me the feral. I want to make
Yep,
sure.
trade
Turning
gap,
feral.
turning feral, all those are on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, wherever you kind of get books at.
Find all those good books at Let Me Die Learning is the handle on that.
You won't be able to get in touch with me much on Instagram because of my ClearSpace app. So you
My
can send me
man,
a
yeah.
DM, but it might take me a while to get back to you.
That's right. No, you do it, man. That's great. Man, super, super appreciative. I'm gonna take these guys through a debrief a little bit. And then I've got a little bit of travels. I will get back to you via email too, because I want to follow up with you and keep conversations going. So
Perfect.
it just may take me a few days. So I just want to give you that heads up. But I am very much honored by the time. I appreciate you, appreciate the work you're doing. We are definitely riding on the same path. So thank you for everything, brother.
Yep. Thank you, gentlemen. You guys have a great debrief and a great rest of your Friday and weekend. We'll talk later.
Thank you,
Awesome.
Mr.
Thank you,
Hanson.
sir.
Bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
sir.